Hi everyone, and welcome to this week's Crime and Punishment story. If you enjoy this story, please give it a like and please subscribe to the channel if you would like to hear more stories like this one or stories about the history of the Northeast area. It might be worth mentioning that I don't have editing equipment, so the audio is always recorded in one take, so sometimes I may make a slight error and correct myself, but hopefully this does not spoil the story. Ambrose Quinn, 28, was the last man hanged at Newcastle prison in 1919 for the murder of his wife Elizabeth. This is his story. Ambrose was born in Newcastle in around 1890. It seems he was named after his grandfather on his mother's side. His parents were James and Elizabeth, and he had at least 7 brothers and sisters. His father, James, was a labourer at the gasworks according to the 1901 census, and by 1911 Ambrose was himself a labourer at Elsick shipyard. He married Elizabeth Ridley in either July or August of 1914. Some information gives different months, and they had 2 children together, both girls. It is often hard to get exact dates as articles from the time often differ. Elizabeth was born in around 1893 and her parents were Thomas and Isabella. She was around 25 years old at the time of her death. In 1917, Ambrose joined the Air Force as a mechanic. His sign-up papers describe him as being 5'2", however later reports describe him as being 5'5" tall. He was said to be a good worker, and I have found no reports of any issues between him and his wife prior to him joining the Air Force. After joining the Air Force, Ambrose would spend some considerable time away from home, but he would be home on leave from time to time, and whenever he was often heard to say that Elizabeth was too fond of going to the pictures and that she used too much paint and powder. It was suggested that he was concerned about what she was doing while he was away. Perhaps the seeds of jealousy were already being sown in his mind. In June of 1919, Ambrose returned home on 3 months' leave, having signed up for 4 or 5 years further service. Reports do differ here again, as some say he had signed up for 4 years and others say 5. The leave, however, was given due to him possibly leaving the country for some time and not being able to get back home for some time after that. It seems all was quiet until the 19th of July 1919, known at the time as Peace Celebration Night. Elizabeth wanted to go out and join in a dance in the street at around midnight, but Ambrose did not want her to go out, and it was heard, according to her father, that Ambrose had threatened to murder her if she didn't take off her outdoor boots. It is also said that Ambrose had been drinking at this time. It is easy to believe that her father did hear this conversation, as at the time they had been living with their children in his house in Hoare Street in Newcastle. Sometime towards the end of July, Ambrose was told by someone who may have been a man named Septimus Robson, who lived in the same street. I could only find one report that actually named him, that Elizabeth had been to a wedding party on Whit Monday the 9th of June and had been escorted home at about 2 a.m. by 2 unknown men. In the words of the person telling Ambrose the tale, he said that one of the men had misconducted himself with Elizabeth in a passage near to her house. It is not clear how this person knew this. Had they seen the incident, or had Elizabeth told them about it? If it was indeed Septimus that had told the story, it is likely that he saw the incident, seeing as he lived in the same street. The story, however, had really angered Ambrose, and he made it his business to try and find out the name of these men. He did find one of the men who had given him the name of the other, but he said he knew nothing of the incident as he had left before they had got near to the passage. Neither of these men ever seemed to have been publicly named, or at least I was not able to find any details of them, unless anyone listening knows and can let me know. It seems unclear if Ambrose went looking for the second man, but he did confront Elizabeth about the story on August the 4th. She is said to have been genuinely upset by the whole ordeal and told him that the man in question had put his hand under her clothes. She seems to have been able to escape him, and she said that it went no further, but Ambrose was now more angry than ever. Elizabeth's father stated that Ambrose had beaten her at the time of her confession, which she later spoke of during a further argument with Ambrose on August the 6th, after Ambrose had threatened to take her children away from her. Her father was witness to her telling Ambrose that she had told him the truth and been beaten for it. It is also said that at this time Ambrose picked up a knife that had been on the table in the house and threw it at Elizabeth. However, she managed to escape into the bedroom and the knife struck the door. It is said that this was the very same day that Ambrose had been to the police station to complain that his wife was not looking after their children properly and that he wanted her separation allowance stopped. I assume this was a payment made to wives of those serving in the armed forces, unless anyone knows differently. The police did visit the house and found the children to be well cared for, although they did describe the house and bedding as being dirty. It is also at this point that Ambrose decided to go and live with his sister, who also happened to live in the same street as Elizabeth's father. On August the 9th, Ambrose was said to have been seen at some of his usual places, most likely to have been local pubs in the area. One witness said he was quite sober at the time he had seen him, but he did not give an accurate account of the actual time in question. His sister and her husband said Ambrose had been with them on the same night until around 10:15 p.m, when he had apparently left them and gone back to their house for his razor. After this, it seems he had gone looking for Elizabeth, and he had met up with her in the street. They were seen talking, and one witness said she had tried to make Elizabeth come away with her, but she had replied, "It's all right, he won't do anything to me, I have confessed, and that is all that is needed." It seems, however, that this was not enough for Ambrose. He was then seen to have grabbed Elizabeth around the shoulders and cut her throat. Another witness said she saw her fall to the floor. It must have been a truly awful thing for anyone to see. It is at this point that reports differ, so it can't be certain which account is the true one. Some say that Ambrose immediately ran from the scene, with one man claiming to have chased him and punched him. Other reports suggest a crowd gathered at the scene and that Ambrose watched them from the other side of the road, and once he realised his wife had died, he then left the scene, with no reports that anyone followed him. The discarded razor was said to be found in the same street as the incident had occurred, and one report even suggests that a broken part of it was handed into the police by a young girl some time later. What is known for certain is that Ambrose gave himself up at Scotswood police station. However, he only told the police that a woman had died. He did not say it was his wife. He was observed at the time to have blood on his hands and also some on his clothing. The police soon found out that the woman was actually Elizabeth Quinn, and Ambrose was arrested and charged with her murder, to which he replied, "I did not mean to kill her." It was later noted that the bruises found on Elizabeth's body, from the details given at the inquest by the doctor who had examined her after her death, proved the evidence that her father had given, saying that Ambrose had already punished her for her lapse of virtue with the unnamed man in the passage near her home. The doctor also reported that the wound to her neck was deep and that considerable force had been used to create it. It was suggested that Ambrose was very jealous of Elizabeth, and that whilst he had been staying at his sister's house, he had struggled to eat. It was also said that for some weeks he had been in a nervous and anxious state of mind. He was, however, said to be of sound mind and not proven to be insane. The information from the trial is very similar to that which I have already mentioned. The jury were quick to reach a verdict of guilty of willful murder, but they recommended mercy. However, the judge sentenced Ambrose to death by hanging. As was the usual practice at the time, an appeal for mercy was launched. The police said to reduce the crime to manslaughter on the grounds that the murder was not premeditated and that Ambrose had not intended to kill Elizabeth was unfounded, as he had purposely gone to get his razor. His appeal and the request for reprieve all failed, and the execution was set for November the 26th, 1919. On the day of the execution, Ambrose was attended by the Reverend Father Joseph Thorman. It is not known if he was asked to confess his crime, or if indeed he did so. There are very few details of his last morning, other than one or two newspaper articles saying that he was quite calm that morning and there was no resistance when he was pinioned, his arms tied at the wrists, and that he walked firmly to the scaffold and appeared resigned to his fate. Death was said to be instantaneous. As was the rules at the time, the body would be left for 1 hour before being removed and later buried in the grounds of Newcastle prison. Ambrose Quinn was executed on the same day as Ernest Bernard Scott. Ernest had murdered his sweetheart. Jealousy was said to have been the motive in both cases. Ernest Scott was executed at 8 a.m. and Ambrose Quinn at 9:15 a.m., making him the last man to be executed at Newcastle prison. Crowds had gathered outside the prison, but there was little or nothing to see. A double execution was very rare. The last one had been in 1901, which had been uncle and nephew John Miller and John Robert Miller. It is said, however, that on this final hanging, not even the death bell was sounded or the black flag flown. As mentioned in a couple of previous stories, several bodies from Newcastle prison were moved in 1925 to a mass unmarked grave at All Saints Cemetery in Newcastle, in what is now known as the Felons Plot. The burials took place at night so that no one but those doing the job knew the location, and it is still unknown today. Ernest Scott, John Miller and John Robert Miller will be the subjects of some future stories on this channel in the coming months. I hope you've enjoyed this very sad and tragic story of how jealousy can lead people to pay the highest price. Please do let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and please do give the video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want to hear more stories like this one. Thank you all for watching.